Chapter 21. Long Journey Home. "Is that your guy?" Angelique asked Gabe, pointing to a stocky man holding a large rifle just down the street they were traveling. Looking in the direction she indicated, Gabe spotted the man. "Yeah, that's him. We'll slow so he can jump in the back. We have spent too much time here as it is." Slowing the troop transport down to a crawl as they came up to Steve's position, Gabe and Angelique watched as Steve quickly ran over to the side of the transport, keeping pace with its movement. Within seconds, Angelique watched as the man who saved her life minutes ago handed his rifle up to another and then boarded the transport himself. "I'm going to want to thank him when we stop," Angelique remarked as she felt the transport accelerate. Angelique, like many of the others, kept a close watch on the area around them as the two transports moved quickly through the outer limits of the Chinese's front line. Angelique marveled at how deserted the area looked and how normal it seemed at the same time, though she knew it was far from normal. "How many men are in your camp?" Angelique inquired, wanting to know more about the Ozark Mountaineers. "I'm still not sure, but I think around 500, Gabe replied, thinking back on the short time he had been with the militia. Gabe's answer puzzled her. "How can you not know how many men you command?" Gabe thought about the question for a second before answering, then figured it was best to tell her the story of how he came to be in this position. "I don't command them or run the militia. They saved my ass when the Chinese attack started. I was pinned down much like you and your guys when they came out of nowhere. When it was all over, they made me a squad leader as I had just arrived back from Afghanistan. Gotta say, this isn't what I expected when landing home, leaving one war and dropping into another. Well, I took a vacation that made me wanted by my own agency." She began to laugh but stopped as she thought of the outcome of the events for her parents. Bringing the conversation back to finding out more about the group, Angelique asked, "How far to the defensive lines you spoke of?" "We should be there in a half hour," Gabe replied, then thought it best to find out more about the group she came from. "Earlier, you said you could help with much more. Just what are you talking about? Supplies, men?" "Both," Angelique replied, not wanting to give too much information to people she didn't know much about at this point. She also decided to change the subject to prevent further inquiries. "You said you were searching for your son. Did you find him?" "No," Gabe said in a tone that let Angelique know that it bothered him as much as the idea of not finding her parents. In that one word, she felt the pain of loss. After a few moments of silence, Gabe began talking. "He always wanted to be in the military, and I think it was to follow in—" Gunfire and bullets striking the vehicle stopped Gabe in mid-sentence. "Is it the Chinese?" Angelique asked as she gripped her M4 rifle, checking to ensure that it was loaded and ready. "No, those are 5.56 rounds. Probably local," Gabe said as another round hit the windshield in front of him after ricocheting off the hood. Seeing where the bullet struck on the red star painted in the center of the hood, Angelique knew why they were being fired on. "Could it be your guys? We need to cover up that red star." With all the excitement of the last hours, Gabe hadn't realized the danger of driving around in an enemy vehicle. "There should be a hardware store in about a mile," Gabe said as the bullet striking the vehicle came to a stop. As they drove, Angelique watched in the mirror located just outside her door for signs that Todd and Ken were okay in the transport, following close behind. Seeing them both sitting up gave her a little peace of mind. "We're almost there. I'm going to pull between the buildings for cover. We have to paint over it, or we'll never make it through the defenses ahead," Gabe informed Angelique, who had already had the same thought. After pulling into the area between the two buildings with the hardware store to the left and what looked to be a dry cleaner on the right, Angelique exited the transport. Heading to the rear of the truck while keeping a close eye on her surroundings, she began checking on the people in the back. "Everybody okay? Anyone hit?" she asked. "We're all good. Just a few cuts from fragments," Blankenship replied. Angelique could hear the doors open on the second transport and saw where bullets had struck. Ken climbed out of the tall vehicle with no visible wounds. "You two okay?" Angelique asked as Ken turned to face her. "Yeah. A few came close, but nothing major. We need to get these damn red stars covered. I think that is why they were shooting at us. Gabe went in to get paint. Check on your passengers. After we get this covered up, we are moving out. So be ready. Angelique could hear Todd on the other side, checking on those in the back. Satisfied that Todd and Ken were okay, Angelique turned back to the people in the rear of her transport and spotted the man she wanted to meet as she neared. "Steve?" she asked, knowing she had the right one from the large rifle he was holding. "Yeah. My name is Angelique Rose Carringer, and I want to thank you for being such a great shot with excellent timing." She raised her right hand up to the back of the truck to shake his hand. "You can thank the Marine Corps for that, ma'am," Steve replied, reaching down to shake her hand. Angelique could tell that he was in good shape, but not to the level of an active-duty Marine. "How long have you been out of the service, Marine?" Angelique asked. "About 7 years now. Thankfully, I have kept up with my rifle skills, though I never figured I would be using them to shoot Chinese soldiers in Missouri. Hell, I figured the only thing I would ever shoot again would be steel targets." As Steve let out a laugh, Angelique finished their conversation. "Well, Marine, I'm glad you did." She saw Gabe come around the corner of the hardware store. "The place has been picked pretty clean, but I guess people don't have a lot of use for paint these days. I found blue and black." He tossed Angelique a few cans and then a few to Todd and Ken. "These will do fine. Okay, let's get them covered and get moving," Angelique said to the others, who were already climbing on the front of the trucks to spray the hoods. After 10 minutes and a half-dozen cans of paint, they were once again back on the road, confident that they wouldn't be shot at, or at least not for looking like the Chinese. "We should be coming up on a checkpoint in a few miles," Gabe said, wanting to keep his new companion informed. Angelique watched as the buildings became fewer and the forest became thicker. "I would like to speak to whoever is in charge when we get there." "That shouldn't be a problem. How did you happen to be in the same area when we needed you?" Angelique couldn't believe the question hadn't dawned on her before now. "Easy. You passed one of our checkpoints and we followed. We didn't see any checkpoints. They're not something we advertise." Just then, Gabe slowed the transport to a stop alongside a heavily wooded area. "Look to your right." Angelique was already looking over, and after a few seconds she saw men camouflaged with rifles pointed at them. "I hope those are your men," she said, not making any sudden movements as two slowly approached. "Yes, they are. Roll down your window," Gabe instructed. Before Angelique could get the window all the way down, Gabe leaned over and shouted through the opening. "Hey boys, open up. It's Michael's 3rd Platoon. I have guests who need to see the commander. Might have some friends out here to help with our little problem." Gabe addressed the men as they neared, stopping them from advancing any closer. "What is the password of the day?" asked one of the heavily camouflaged. "George," Gabe replied. Satisfied with the response, the militiamen lowered their weapons and gave a hand signal to what appeared to be nobody, to Angelique. That was until a clump of trees 30 feet ahead began moving out from the forest. As they walked farther out, Angelique could see they were attached like a billboard to the front of an old truck. Behind the truck were 3 men pushing, revealing a road leading into the forest. "Now I understand why we didn't see a checkpoint," Angelique said. Driving down the hidden road, Gabe could see Angelique staring at the men training and preparing for the Chinese to advance. "I wish I had the men from my unit with me. Unfortunately, they are stuck overseas. I was only supposed to have a short visit home," he explained. Her attention drawn from the men around her, Angelique looked at Gabe. "Yeah, visiting home is great. See your family, watch your family get taken by the government, join a militia, revolt against your government, and fight a foreign invasion. What more could a person ask for?" "Ice cream," Gabe answered as a small wooden building came into view covered by camouflaged netting. Angelique became much more serious at the sight of what she assumed was the headquarters. Gabe looked up to the treetops for the most cover under which to park the transports to prevent them from being seen from overhead. "I don't guess I could get you to leave your weapons?" Angelique didn't bother to respond but gave him a look that said, "Over my dead body." Her expression was all the answer he needed. "Yeah, I didn't think so. Shall we? Angelique said after a moment, already opening the door. As they climbed down from the cab, several men exited the building and began walking their way. What is this, Michaels? Asked a man standing 5'11" with broad shoulders. Angelique figured the man to be the head guy and in his mid-60s. None of the men wore any rank, so it made it difficult for her to tell, but for the men standing to the left and right of the guy inquiring about the trucks. Sir, this is Carringer. She and 2 others were captured helping civilians with the Chinese. After we freed them, we brought them here. I believe she may be able to help us. After looking Angelique over, as well as the 2 men walking up behind her, the commander began to speak. I am Commander Atkins of the Ozark Mountaineers. We can talk inside, but first, medic, Atkins called out. 2 men quickly ran over to his position with bags in their hands marked with a red cross. See to those who need it and report, Atkins directed the 2 before they ran off to the transports. Angelique was glad to see his concern for the wounded, but also noticed the commander keeping a close eye on the weapons that she, Todd, and Ken held. Shall we? Atkins asked as he turned back to the building, not waiting for a reply. Stopping before entering the door, Atkins turned. Michaels, he said, seeing that Gabe hadn't joined them. Once inside, Angelique noted that the commander wasn't one for extravagance. His desk was a simple table. On one side of the room was a soldier operating a working radio, and stacked along the walls were crates marked 5.56 ball. The sight put Angelique a little more at ease with the group. Had it been decorated and opulent like many those in power feel the need to have, she had been prepared to leave. Take a seat, please. Atkins gestured with an open hand to 3 chairs sitting in front of the old table. I'll stand if it is all the same to you, Todd replied, not wanting to put himself in a vulnerable position. Same here, Ken said, feeling much the same as Todd. Very well, Atkins responded to the newcomers as they moved to opposite sides of the small room. Trusting that Todd and Ken had their safety in hand, Angelique took a seat along with Michaels. So, Miss Carringer, what can I do for you? Atkins asked, taking a seat on the other side of the table. Gabe here tells me you plan on fighting the Chinese when they advance from the city, Angelique stated, not really answering Atkins's question but wanting to see in which direction he took the conversation. That is correct. We have requested volunteers from the surrounding areas, and when they come, we will hold them. Atkins's tone wasn't fully believable to Angelique. She could tell the man had enough understanding of war to know it would be bloody. Why not attack them in the city rather than wait for them to come out here? Ken asked from where he stood along the wall. Atkins sat up straight in his chair before answering. We have sent scouts into the city. The Chinese have taken over Lambert Airport and have been flying in troops without end. Their numbers are too great in the city, and civilian deaths would be high. Out here, they will have to spread their forces, making it easier to fight them guerrilla style. Angelique liked what she was hearing from Atkins as well as the emotion he used. When he spoke, it was with the wisdom of battles fought and the concern of a leader who had lost soldiers fighting them. Commander, we are with the United Constitutional Militia, Angelique informed him. Atkins didn't move or even seem to blink. He sat studying the 3 as if with new eyes. As he focused on the patch on Todd's sleeve with its diamond shape and crossed lightning bolts, he saw 3 letters, UCM, in the top center in bold print. So my men never made it to you? Atkins asked with a sorrowful tone in his voice. No, we never received anyone with messages from this area, Angelique informed Atkins as he slowly stood, placing his hands behind his back and clasping them together. With his head slightly bowed, he took a deep breath. I sent 2 men the day we came under attack to make contact and bring help. He paused briefly to regain himself, for one of the 2 men he sent was his son, and that was information that Atkins didn't want to share. How is your commander? I was watching him on the news right before everything went dark. Angelique felt as if talking about people they had lost was going to become the new normal. Sorry to report he didn't make it. Staff Sergeant Carl Karnick is in charge of the militia now. Sorry to hear that. Atkins thought for a second and felt the need to move the conversation forward. Sitting back down in his chair, Atkins asked, How can you help us fight the Chinese? When we left, people were still pouring for the fight, and at that time, there were almost 1,000. Had you heard anything from Fort Leonard Wood or Whiteman Air Force Base? Atkins was very curious as to the strength of troops at the two facilities. Nothing. Angelique raised her right hand with her pointer finger out as she stood, letting Atkins know that she needed a minute with her comrades. Atkins nodded and began rubbing the stubble on his face. While thinking about what the next move should be, images of his son clouded his thoughts. We are all in agreement? Angelique asked, ending her conversation with Ken and Todd. Sounds good, Todd responded with Ken in agreement. Angelique took the short walk back to her seat where Gabe and Atkins talked between themselves. We have a suggestion. We three and Gabe will head back to Jefferson City to bring back help. On the way, we will detour to Fort Leonard Wood and inform them of the situation here if they don't already know about it. Angelique stood by her chair waiting for a reply from Atkins. Carringer, that sounds like a great plan. Just one thing. You should take one of the trucks you came in on. It will get you there faster and safer than the motorcycles. I agree, Commander, Angelique said, knowing there was no way they were going back to the city for the motorcycles in the first place. Noakes! Atkins called out to one of his personnel outside the building. Seconds later, a very young man came through the door. Noakes here will get you everything you will need for the trip, including more than enough fuel. Atkins was happy with the plan and didn't want to waste time when the Chinese could decide to move at any moment. Noakes took the four around to the building about 100 yards down to where the hill began to sharply slope. There, Angelique and the others could see what looked like platforms coming out from the hill. Walking past the nearest one, they could see they were not platforms but roofs. In order to keep things hidden from eyes above and to provide some security, areas had been dug out of the hillside and roofs placed above them using only items found in the forest. Looking in, Angelique was surprised at how much room it had and how far back it had been dug out. Hey, aren't those our motorcycles? Ken asked, pointing with his chin to 3 motorcycles leaning up against one side. Yeah, we brought them back shortly after you left them. Didn't think you would live to use them again, Noakes replied with a slight laugh. Noakes helped each with ammunition, food, and water. Then he directed a few nearby soldiers to fuel the trucks and load 40 gallons of fuel as well. Hey, make sure you stack sandbags around those. We don't want anyone putting holes in them, Todd told the men carrying the cans of fuel. Yes, sir. Sir? I'm a master sergeant. Don't call me sir, you little shit. Whoa there, Master Sergeant. Remember, they're on our side, Angelique said playfully to Todd as she motioned for him to start moving back to the transport truck. After spending an hour getting things ready to move, Angelique and Ken climbed into the cab of the truck, while Todd and Gabe jumped into the back. Todd had the men place sandbags around the fuel tanks, stacking them 3 high along the sides and 4 high across the back. Once in the back, Todd lay down, using a sandbag as a pillow with his head to the cab of the truck. With his rifle lying across his chest, Todd closed his eyes. Gabe looked at Todd, amused by the sight. You really going to try and sleep? He could hear the truck engine come to life. Todd opened one eye as if only halfway waking up to answer. It's been a long day.